not necessarily a single moment of awakening. But there's no doubt, I mean, we heard from William Bodiford that according to modern Soto doctrine or interpretations of Dogen, people aren't supposed to be very concerned with awakening. There's criticisms of Rinzai Zen for being Taigo Zen, like awaiting, the Zen of waiting for awakening or trying to gain awakening. And this is sort of, in Orthodox Soto of the 20th century, this is kind of a no-no. But, you know, I would say that when you read Dogen, you realize he very clearly distinguishes between people who are awakened and people who are not. He says, those who have attained the way and those who have not yet attained the way. And, you know, and he obviously thinks he's one, and he thinks he can tell whether you know, you're one or not. And so, you know, it's not like in Dogen's writing, the distinction between awakening and not awakening is missing. It's there. It's just not, he doesn't use koans as a kind of instrument to, you know, force awakening. It rather takes place over a longer period of time. Now, the most famous koan used by Dakwe, and many of you have probably heard of this, is Jiaozhou's Wu, or Joshu's Mu. So the koan goes like this. A monk asked Jiaozhou, even in a dog, is there Buddha nature or not? And Jiaozhou said, Wu, or in Japanese, Mu. Now, it's standard Buddhist doctrine that all living beings have the Buddha nature. And Wu, or in Chinese, or Mu in Japanese, means does not have. Like if I say, do you have any money? You say, Wu, no, I don't have any. Okay? Or there is none. That's what it means. So to ask if a dog has Buddha nature, you know, he says, no, there is none. Or no, the dog doesn't have it. Right? Now that flies in the face of standard Buddhist teachings. Now I want to explain it to you like this. To ask if a dog has Buddha nature is just like asking, does Santa Claus have a red suit? Right? And the answer, Wu, no, literally, he doesn't have, is puzzling because every kid knows Santa Claus is dressed in red. Right? But if we consider the truth of the matter, Santa Claus does not really exist in any ultimate sense. You know, I mean, I'm a parent, and I talk them up with my young kids, but certainly I don't count on Santa Claus to bring their presents. So if you ask, does Santa Claus have a red suit? The answer is Wu, or Mu. There is none, or better, no such thing. All right? Now, that example, the Santa Claus example, and I'm going to torment you with it because it's not, I'm not done. But this illustrates two basic Mahayana Buddhist doctrines that koans are grounded in. And the two doctrines are the doctrine of emptiness and its corollary, the doctrine of two truths. Now, the emptiness doctrine very simply states that there's no such thing as a being, there's no such thing as a thing. The concept of a being and the concept of a thing are empty categories. The categories are empty because there's nothing in the real world that meets the criteria. When you think of a thing, you know, it's very clear, it is what it is, it's not other things, it has a discrete boundary around it. It is what it is in some kind of Platonic sense forever. And if you look for things like that in the real world, there aren't any. So thing is a null set, empty concept, okay? But extremely useful. As a matter of fact, we need the concept of thing to have language, all right? Another example of an empty concept would be a circle as defined in mathematics. It's a very useful idea. Are there any, what's a circle? Like all the points on the radius are equidistant from the center, on the circumference are equidistant, something like that, right? Are there any actual circles in the universe that meet the definition? No. Even the roundest thing that human beings can make, if you look at it close under an electron microscope, it's got hills and valleys. Not to mention the molecules flying off. Is there any such thing as a line? No. All right. Is there any such thing as a thing? No. So this is the Buddhist doctrine of emptiness. Okay. it's a little bit hard to get used to. But from that point of view, because language inevitably involves talking about things, all language is somehow defective. You know, everything we name kind of reifies things in the world in a way that they're not actually in the real world reified. The real world is more dynamic and fluid than our language makes it seem. So there's a kind of built-in flaw with language. So now the doctrine of two truths basically just states this, that on a conventional level, we can talk about what things are and what are not. On a conventional level, Santa Claus wears red, right? At least in some cultures. My Swiss friend tells me he wears something different in Switzerland. Okay. But the Coca-Cola Santa Claus wears red, right? This is a conventional truth. But the ultimate truth, so anyway, on the conventional level, the world is made up of discrete things or entities that interact with each other, and those things are named according to the conventions of language. You know, so we agree on what to call things. Different languages have different names, and you know, we understand that in some way the names are arbitrary, but they work. Now, ultimate truth in the Buddhist context is that it's not a thing. It's not something you can have insight about. Ultimate truth is simply the idea that because nothing meets the definition of a dharma or a thing, and because language depends on the concept of things, no verbal statement can ever be ultimately true. You can't describe the world in a way that's ultimately true. Now this is the underpinning of the koan literature. All right. So now, so you could ask, does Santa Claus have a red suit? The answer could be, wait, what? Jiao Zhou, woo. No such thing. No such thing as what? No such thing as Santa Claus. No such thing as red suits either. Okay? No such thing as a dog. No such thing as Buddha nature. These are just empty concepts, but they're useful concepts. They're conventionally agreed upon. But if you say that, wow, Jiao Zhou is really cool. No such thing. Woo. But that's wrong, isn't it? Because that statement uses the concept of a thing. So that, you know, Jiao Zhou, if I'm going to respond to him, he gets a smack, okay? For saying way too much when he says woo. Does that follow? Yeah. Okay? Now, I did a smack, okay? How many Zen koans have the master just hitting someone? Or you know, the master shouting? Actually, that's, you know, what are you going to say when you can't say anything? And when the question is, you know, is diluted. Like, what is Buddha? That question in itself is flawed. Okay? So a shout or a blow, you know, it is an appropriate response, but you could also say woo, no such thing. Okay? Now, I want to take some other famous koans and translate them using Santa Claus. Just make sure you understand them. So Yunmen was asked, what is Buddha? Another, one time he said, dry piece of shit. Another time he said, an oak tree in the garden. Like, wow. I mean, that's either like drivel, right? Or it's extremely profound. It's a complete non sequitur. What is Buddha? Oak tree in the garden? Okay, but I'm going to say, no. What is, when he's asked, what is Buddha? How about saying Santa Claus? All right? That's the answer. Now, that's exactly the same kind of answer. And why is that? Because Santa Claus kind of exists as a story, and yet doesn't exist. So what Yunmen is saying is, Buddha is exactly that kind of thing. That's what Buddha is. In a certain sense, conventionally, Buddha exists. But from the ultimate point of view, if you're hung up on the idea of Buddha or becoming a Buddha, you have a big problem. There's no such thing. All right? Both at the same time. Now, you know, one of the tricks of the koan rhetoric is that it often uses similes and metaphors. But the words like or as if are left unspoken. So when Newman was asked, what is Buddha? He could have said, if he was a little bit kinder, Buddha is like the oak tree in the garden. Like make it a simile. Okay? And then you could ask yourself, well, why is the Buddha like an oak tree in the garden? Right? So that like is implicit in the answer, but just to make it difficult for you, the Zen guys take out. You know, they use metaphors all the time, but they never tell you it's a metaphor. They use similes all the time, but they don't tell you. Right? You just get this cold, like, what's Buddha? Oak tree in the garden. Right? You don't know what to do. So, but put like in. I mean, you know, try it. Works. And so, but also eluded from the koan literature are quotation marks. Like, for example, why would Buddha be like an oak tree in the garden? It's not at all. Because they both grow, they're living things. You know, no, you're just way on the wrong track with that kind of thinking. If you supply the quotation marks, to say Buddha, that the mental act, the conceptual act of saying Buddha is exactly the same as the mental or conceptual act of saying oak tree in the garden. In both cases, you imagine there's a thing there, and you imagine it has a name, right? And from the Buddhist standpoint of the emptiness doctrine, both of those are wrong in the same way, right? So that's a very philosophical explanation of that koan, and I hope that it, you know, gets you, enables you to start to understand it. Now, you know, there's a very famous koan attributed to Linji. He says, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha, right? Okay. How about, if you meet a Santa Claus, kill that Santa Claus? Okay? Now, this sounds really shocking. Kill the Santa Claus? We're supposed to, like, this is America, we can get guns, okay? So we're going to go down to the mall, find the guys in the red suits who have kids on their laps, and boom, 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 okay? Is that what we're talking about? This kind of disgusting violence, you know, I should be careful because you never know in this country, some person's going to hear that and say, yeah, but Buddha's going to go kill Santa Claus. You know, actually, Santicide, I made up that word, Santicide does not take place in the mall with crazy people. It takes place in our elementary schools. You know why? Because the older kid, the kid says, you know what? Ha ha, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. And then the little kid goes, oh no, you know? So that's Santicide, okay? And that's where it really takes place. Now, you know, in the Lotus Sutra, which Dogen loves, the Buddha actually kills himself. He announces that the story of his birth and his career and his attainment of awakening and his turning of the wheel of the Dharma and his nirvana are not really true. He says, that's like a Santa Claus story. He says, I made that up. You know, it's just a skillful means. It's a teaching device. And as a matter of fact, the real Buddha is eternal and always available to all of you, and you should all strive to become Buddhists. That's the message of the Lotus Sutra. And I was thinking about that. I'm still not done with Santa Claus, because after he's dead, all the grown-ups know that Santa Claus is dead, right? So what do? You go tell your children about Santa Claus to keep them alive, and you make sure that your kids have presents, all right? So keeping Santa Claus alive, that means we're Santa Claus, right? And the message of the Lotus Sutra is, we're the Buddha.